whoever's first on stage gets the nicer questions. So that's Mark. Mark, why is Airbus so brilliant? Mark, would you like to... You're all divisions of large aviation companies designed to keep you guys innovative and on track. Exactly how does it work for Airbus?
A-Cubed is one of our global innovation centers. A-Cubed was set up now 4 years ago. And the real reason for setting up an organization like A-Cubed was to have something that's operating on the edge, if you like, outside of the of some of the constraints of a large company. Because in the business today, our real challenge, and I think one of the things we bring to the large company culture is speed. Speed is something that big companies are not good at, and it's something that we think that the smaller, more agile type innovation centers like the one we run brings real value to the larger companies.
So some great things to come back to. What's your personal background?
My personal background, I'm an engineer. I've been an engineer for 30 odd years, 20 odd years in Airbus. Before taking on this role, I was technical director of the Beluga XL, technical director and chief engineer of the Beluga XL, our super outsized transport aircraft, which we use to transport all of our components. The aircraft will now be certified in the next couple of months. So that was really my baby, and that was a project we did in half the time and at half the cost that everybody in the company believed was possible. So I'm not new to doing and delivering the impossible. And I took over this job nearly a year ago now. So yeah, it's been an exciting time.
Michael, how's Boeing different to A-Cubed? Boeing HorizonX different? How do you fit into Boeing?
Yeah, so HorizonX is about 2.5 years old, and so I'm on the venture side, but HorizonX is a much bigger organization. We've got 50 or 60 people divided across 3 teams. One team is Disruptive Horizons. They're really focused on test and learns and experimenting with new technologies and business models. And some of the work that came out of that, for example, was this acknowledgement that we need to stand up a new P&L around disruptive mobility, which is Boeing Next. We have a second group, which is our market development group, and they're really focused on working with peer organizations in other industries. And when we can talk about some of the stuff where we're taking our capabilities and our partners' capabilities to go after new markets, it's pretty amazing. And then the ventures team, which is the team I'm on, there's about 15 of us. And we're typically Series A, Series B investors. First check, we're 1 to 10. But what I'll say the leadership of Boeing recognized is they saw this disruption that was happening primarily in the automotive market at the time with Uber and Lyft and autonomy. And they recognized that just having a business unit look at this wasn't the right approach. So we're actually at the corporate level, and our mantra is we do what the business units either won't or can't do. And it's not because they don't have the chops to do it, but they're focused on the next quarter's numbers or delivering the next product versus thinking out 5 or 10 years.
And were you at Boeing before?
No, I've been at Boeing about 15 years now, but prior to that I did private equity work for 5 years and then corporate strategy and corporate development work.
Andre, Embraer X. Which of you came up with it first, the X?
Well, they did. I give you that. And but the X stands for exponential. And that's one of the reasons why we were created. We do share a lot of Embraer, including the name as well. And Embraer is known for innovation. Doing airplanes out of Brazil is not the most obvious place where I expect aerospace company to grow. And we were doing that before we were producing bicycles in the country. So we do have this DNA of innovation.
Years ago,
but to keep on moving forward and to keep reinventing ourselves, we need to bring something else. That's where the Embraer X, the reason why Embraer X was created, to try to join all this expertise, all this
100 years ago,
know-how.
on a dark morning that seemed to hold no promise.
With what's
A
new,
small
what's
plane was
exciting,
getting
what's
ready
happening
for
in Silicon
takeoff on
Valley,
a muddy
for example.
field.
This disruptive side, the newest technologies, the newest business models, how we could integrate that with the mother company, and always focusing on the people, on you guys, and all of us, trying to figure out not necessarily what's the new technology that's out there, but also what's the new or old problem to be solved that could improve people's life, but using something that could be potentially disruptive, it could bring exponential growth for the company.
So, all of you, your job is, and you, sorry, you came from the commercial side as well, didn't you?
Yeah. Gilda's in charge. I've been with Embraer for 20 odd years. I was one of the first hires after privatization. So I've been through a few changes throughout the history of the company. My last role was the head of product strategy and market strategy for commercial aviation. And as we are going to a new phase with our new commercial jets, with the first deliveries, I just delivered the latest jet a couple weeks ago for the 195. The opportunity to join Embraer X pop up, and I actually was requested to send someone from my team to spend some time in the Silicon Valley, help to create the first view on urban air mobility. And by that time, I said, "Oh, scrap that, I'm not sending anyone, I'm going." And here I am.
So you're all set up as divisions to drive innovation and work fast, as Mark said. There was a trend about, actually probably 15 years ago, when legacy airlines saw low-cost carriers, and so they all set up subsidiaries to be low-cost. You know, BA had Go, United had TED, and one of the problems I remember them saying that when they closed them is because everyone in the legacy airline was like, we don't have to worry about costs because that's the job of TED or Go. Or does it worry you that people in Airbus and Boeing and Embraer don't need to worry about being innovative because that's your job? Michael?
No, and I think we need to break out what innovation is. If you think about technology innovation, I mean, you can look at some of the great things Boeing has done. If you Google Delta Clipper, for example, in the early 90s, we actually did a rocket that landed itself. You know, so Xerox PARC, for example, with Apple, you know, Bell, they're all legacy companies are great technologies, but where they sometimes lack is the innovative business models. So what we're here for is to engage that ecosystem and understand these new innovative business models and how we can leverage them, how we can plug into them, and how we can help them grow and really bring the next generation of transportation to market.
Mark, do you?
No, I'm not worried about Airbus's ability to innovate. I think Airbus has a great history of innovation. That's how we became successful in this industry. You know, we were the first company to build big twins, the first company to build fly-by-wire airplanes, major structural composites, and so on. But what I think we have started to lose with the growth in the size of the business is the ability to see the disruptive innovation that's coming over the horizon. And that was the reason why A-Cube was set up. A-Cube really was triggered by Airbus somewhat missing the boat in new space with the development of new launch capabilities that our people just didn't see as being a threat to our existing business. So our role is really to look through the lens of the future and highlight to the company where these threats or opportunities for our business are coming from, and push that into the business. And that I think we've been pretty successful in doing. The first 3 years of A-Cube was very much about urban air mobility with Vahana, Voom, and Airbus UTM, or Altiscope as it was called at the time. And that's created a new division in Airbus. So we have a business division in Airbus created from three A-Cube projects. So I think I'm optimistic that we have the structure to do that. It's not always easy, but it's there when it works.
Okay. Andre, nice question for you. You're all telling us how innovative you were as companies, but 150 years ago, they'd probably, at the San Francisco Buggy Whip Convention, we would probably have people saying, and we've used Willow for the first time. And no buggy whip manufacturers managed to evolve into cars.
If you will do that or not, that's the question. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. I don't believe in doing really disruptive innovation by your own, any company. I do believe in collaboration. I do believe if you want to disrupt, actually that was some words from Equbit that I really brought to my heart, was that Equbit was created to disrupt Airbus before someone else did. So I love that tagline. And I believe on that. But to do that, I really believe in collaboration. I really believe on bringing our strengths and join that with the Silicon Valley approach, with startups, with companies even like Uber that has a completely different background than we have. When that collaboration was announced, it was quite pretty hard for people inside the company to understand it. What's that? That's a ride-sharing company for cars. Why are you guys doing that with them? And that's the way, I believe. I mean, that's really matching these different expectations and different strategies to create something that's new. I think we need that to be really disruptive and to really be successful in these new markets.
But Michael, Boeing is such a big company, and HorizonX is how many employees?
60.
And how many is the rest of Boeing commercial airplanes?
So all of Boeing's about 160,000.
Okay. Can you actually pivot? Can 60 of you pivot such a large organization or keep it disruptive?
So our goal is to find the partners out there that will help us do that. When you're a $1 billion program, tens of billions of dollars, it's hard to do that. You're always focused on the next quarter, but we're there to start driving and finding those early adopters that we can push some of these companies into. So I know over the last 2.5 years, we've helped instill a culture change within Boeing, and that's one of the biggest things, is to get you out of just going to your same conferences, seeing the same people, having the same biases and mindset about new technologies and business models. It's getting out there and recognizing how fast innovation is happening and how fast it can turn the tables on your business and bringing that thought process back to the company.
Okay, Mark, you mentioned that you started focusing on UTM, and we've talked about, we have Voom speaking later today. What technologies are you looking at now? What's really exciting you guys? So, the graduate, when they have the scene about plastics.
Yeah, I mean, what's really exciting us today, and we see as a real opportunity for the company, is in the Valley in the last 2 to 2.5 years, there's been something like $100 billion invested in machine learning and AI in the pursuit of autonomous cars. Now, we know that the next generation of aircraft will have to be much more autonomous than they are today, partly for the reason that was previously mentioned in terms of training. For the sustainability of our business, we cannot train 600,000 new pilots over the next 20 years. We don't believe that's feasible. So we have to reduce the number of pilots on aircraft. I doubt we will go to completely pilotless large commercial aircraft, but the next generation will probably be single pilot operated.
Is that ever, you don't think, will go, or just not in
my lifetime, or in my career? So autonomy is something which we see as a real opportunity and a real change for the business, and the talent and infrastructure that exists here in the Valley is really ideally suited to developing those technologies for the next generation of large commercial aircraft.
I love the fact that people always put really disruptive technology occurring after they've retired. It's never in my career that it will happen.
Oh, the single pilot aircraft will happen in my career.
No pilot will be after you've retired, the day after. Andre, what technologies, you guys have done a lot in the urban air mobility as well. What technologies, apart from that, are you very excited about?
Well, part of the key technologies that will make that possible and disrupt our airspace as we know it, you mentioned autonomous. Definitely, autonomous systems is something that we believe, and we are seeing that happening in a much more challenging environment in terms of technology, which is the car industry. We don't have drunken guys pass in front of you if you are an airplane. Hopefully not, at least. But
maybe
that,
Moscow.
yeah, maybe a buzzard or something. So that's definitely something I see. First, reducing the pilot workload. So there are some quick wins on autonomous technologies. And going beyond that, going beyond the aircraft itself, electrical aviation is something that can be quite disruptive. Coming from commercial aviation side, it's with all this background of half of the cost being on fuel for the typical airline. That helps you understand, okay, that's something can be done. And if you're doing that and reducing emissions at the same time, that's a great thing. If you can create this new paradigm in terms of costs, operational costs, you can really bring aerospace to a much bigger crowd and help a lot of lives. It seems like, okay, that's just buzzwords saying that you're going to help people's lives. But I believe in mobility. I believe in mobility as something that can change the world. And all this can help to reduce the cost and literally bring aerospace closer to the people. And when I'm thinking about urban air mobility, that's exactly what's happening.
Michael, I know you have about 20 different technologies you've identified as disruptive. Which ones are you most excited about now?
So I personally like quantum compute, quantum sensing. Maybe they're a little long yet before they're to the point of commercialization, but there's a lot of potential there. But even within aerospace, the subsystems, electrification, the battery technology need for that's really evolving. The motors are really evolving. Then the materials for supersonic, hypersonic, lighter weight to make electrification happen are all interesting.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, I thought I was trying to, could we put Slido up, please? I thought I was trying to ask tough questions, but I particularly like this one. Are strategics misdirecting limited creative talent towards white elephants, effectively reducing general technology advancement? Yes or no? Don't fight over who gets to answer it.
Yeah.
Andre, you made the mistake of looking over.
Yeah, I do that. No, I think they can. They can. Obviously, if there are some misdirect and you are going towards the wrong direction, yes, that's not necessarily a good thing. But more often than not, disruptive technologies and disruptive choices, they happen by chance. You can invest as much as you want, go in one direction, and discover something completely different that they're not expecting. We are putting a lot of our bets closer to our core in aerospace in that sense, right? You never entered in the urban air mobility market before because there was no really such thing anyway. But it's closer to what we do. You're talking about things that fly from A to B. We're talking about new platform business for service and support for aerospace, with something closer to what we're thinking. But out of these initial initiatives, you can end up doing something completely different that we're not expecting. There's plenty of stories about that from the Post-its from 3M that were trying to solve something completely different. And even your point about the bug carts, we had this story about New York and the horse-drawn carriers there. And the problem they were trying to solve is to reduce the amount of manure and the smell. And now we have all these cars, and we end up solving mobility in a much different way than we were expecting. So misdirection sometimes, you can have a bit of serendipity and end up in a very good place as well.
Well, I think part of at least role of HorizonX is maybe not white elephants to make those longer term bets. Boeing has 45,000 engineers, 2,000 tech fellows, over 300 strategists. Sort of the general technology advancement, we can do in-house. It's finding sort of the new thought processes around business models and how to engage the market, and then the convergence that's happening in the market. Auto industry coming into auto, aero, vice versa. And getting those insights across industries.
I think on that, I would say that the big companies, the big players today are actually pretty good at the general technology advancement. You know, look at the progress that aviation has made on reduction in fuel burn compared to the automotive industry. You know, we've made enormous progress in reducing the improving the efficiency of our aircraft. What we're not so good at is the disruptive stuff, and I come back to the urban air mobility. Everybody saw that. Everybody in Airbus saw that as a white elephant 3 years ago. I don't think people do now, because they start to realize that urban air mobility, or particularly these distributed electric propulsion vehicles that are emerging as the preferred urban air mobility platform, they are going to be a major threat to our light helicopter business. So it's in our own interests to be in there and aware of when that threat is going to become a serious one. So yes, there are some white elephants, but that's part of the reason why we operate in the way we do. We have to be prepared for some of our projects not to be successful.
And it's interesting, I've spoken to I've spoken to colleagues in your light helicopter division who are still deeply skeptical of eVTOL. And, and it probably wouldn't have happened without A-Cube.
Absolutely, it definitely wouldn't have happened without A-Cube. But I think this is something you will see in every single industry. Major breakthroughs in technology in any industry very rarely come from the experts within the industry. They generally come from some tangential, outside of the industry. And you're right, people who've spent 35 years designing helicopters think helicopters are going to continue forever. And they'll be the last ones who realize that you go back to you talked about, the buggies and horses. Henry Ford said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they'd have said they wanted a faster horse. But what they actually wanted was a car.
So we've got a question for you, Mark, from a millennial. Or someone trying to write like a millennial. Transpose was so OMG cool. What happened to it? Actually, it's not millennial, there's only one exclamation mark. What happened to it? Follow up, if you build it, will they come?
So Transpose was one of the projects that we did. For the ones that don't know, it was a project where we looked at building modular elements that could be loaded into a cargo aircraft to provide a very highly configurable passenger experience or passenger cabin, literally, that could be changed from flight to flight or day to day. What happened to it was, what we very quickly discovered was that the economics of a vehicle like that really don't make sense, because the weight penalty of having these loadable, swappable modules is too high, and we fight like hell for every kilo on our aeroplanes, and what makes money for the airlines is the efficiency of the vehicle. So Transpose in that sense was not the breakthrough that we thought it might be. There was some interesting technology that came out of it. I don't want to talk about all of it here, because some of it's intellectual property that we'll pursue. But I think it's a great example of the sort of project that an organization like A-Cube can pursue and stop when the time is right, but that the big mothership organization would just never start.
Okay, question from Brad.
Collectively, you all have invested in probably more than 100 companies. Are there any that you want to highlight are ones that you predict will be big winners? And have you generated any insights that are helping you inform the ways in which you're changing how you intend to invest going forward?
So we've invested in about 25 companies, so we're averaging about a deal a month. One of our companies is here, Cuberg, they're outside. Partner of ours, Ariane's in the back there. So we're investing across a whole spectrum, not just subsystems, but up through the platform level. So within HorizonX, as you mentioned, we're looking across a lot of sectors. So we actually invest out of 4 thematics. One is mobility transformation, and Dominic will be here later today to talk about that a little bit. Space and connectivity, Industry 4.0, so that's training, additive manufacturing, advanced materials, workforce optimization, things along those lines. And then the final one is digital acceleration, and so that's quantum advanced computing, things along those lines. But when you think about Boeing, we're just not an aircraft business on the commercial side, but we're also a space business. We've got every product under the sun to help defense and security customers. We've got maintenance, mods, et cetera. So when we're thinking about things that enable the ecosystem, we're looking across the whole value chain and things that might be able to help. So probably 70% of our portfolio has actually been proprietary information or access insights from our in-house subject matter experts. So we like to think that gives us actually a leg up versus a financial investor, because we've actually had our smart people sort of vet this technology. So we'll see in a few years when we start having some exits if our numbers are better than financial investors. But I'd like to think that we're making some pretty good bets.
Maybe just to say, we at Airbus, we also have a venture capital arm called Airbus Ventures in the Valley, which is run by Thomas Dahluen. So that's deliberately operated separately from ACube for IP reasons. So I won't talk about. We have something like a similar number of companies that Airbus Ventures has invested in a very wide range of applications, but I'll leave others to talk about the details of those. But it's in the same sort of fields, I think, that Boeing have been investing in.
Yeah, HorizonX itself is not a venture capital fund, but we do collaborate with some funds, both here and down in Brazil as well. We probably have invested about the same order of companies. We are not remotely as large as Boeing or Airbus on that, but we have a few good bets. Not all of them I can disclose, but we are seeing movements that you would not have seen if we were not close to these companies. So more than investing just on the company, we are learning. We are almost investing on the learning machine in a way to learn how they are doing things and help us transform ourselves.
It's a nice one for the audience. Does anyone have let's make it a project as well, so it's not just investment. Is there anything you guys are particularly jealous of?
Well, Boeing invested in this aerospace company in Brazil that produces commercial airplanes. I'm quite jealous of that. That was a good call. But
okay, any more questions from the audience?
I would say what I would say there. My answer to that is a speculative one, because I don't think anybody knows the answer yet. But I will be most jealous of the company that has made, or that will ultimately be seen to have made the investment in the battery technology that will become the future benchmark. And I don't think any of us know if we've backed the winning horse yet or not.
No, batteries are going to be key, and there's so many different technologies and chemistries. So it will be interesting to see who actually wins that race.
We've all got money on a horse, and the horses are running, and I'm jealous of the winner.
Are they running, or are they still in the stalls?
No, they're running.
Okay. Do you guys fight over deals? Do you know when, or projects? Do you know when you're?
So from our side, no. We actually recognize that part of what we need to do as the largest aerospace company is to support the whole ecosystem. And just think about the power of a Airbus and Boeing investment in a company, and it becomes a de facto standard. And if that is to lock down from a cybersecurity perspective, the avionics boxes, things along those lines, we're very open to doing that. Unfortunately, we haven't had the opportunity to do co-investment yet, but we're not opposed to it.
Here's a nice question. When it comes to, which I've just managed to delete by accident, when it comes to project, how much do you rely on an execution of a new development project? How much do you rely on external partners versus internal engineering development test?
So in A-Cubed, in the development of our projects, we do, I mean, fundamentally they're internal projects that we're developing, but we do rely on external partners for key technology so for example, if you took, for example, our Vahana urban air mobility demonstrator, we rely on key partners for components like, next generation electric motors, battery technology, and things like that. But we try and keep the overall architecture decisions and development internal, as it were.
Here's a nice question. Is there a future of integrated propulsion, or will there always be an engine? If battery is important, aren't the engine makers the key to the future? At the end of, let's rephrase that. At the end of the day, you guys make tubes with stuff on the end. Are the engine makers really driving all the innovation?
Well, one thing you see that, and again, it's one of the reasons we see urban air mobility as a blue ocean, is that the whole supply chain needs to be rethought. We need to rethink everything. And there are opportunities to do it in a different way, as we are doing today. So not necessarily it would be an engine OEM or a battery supplier or our electron supplier. How we're gonna deal with that might be different. And there's definitely room to think differently. And we need to do that if you really want to disrupt the market. Otherwise, we're just replacing one thing for the next. And that goes back to, that's still innovation, but it's gradual innovation. If you really want to disrupt it and get the most out of it, particularly with things like integrated propulsion, electric propulsion, that allows you to have things that are not a tube and a wing. If you're thinking about all the eVTOL market, we are back to day one of aviation. Each one of us or other startups out there have completely different solutions. They have tilt rotors, tilt wings, lift plus cruise, passenger drones. So there are different approaches and different solutions. And now's the time to think differently in the business model as well.
Maybe I would add, I think the question is quite perceptive in talking about integrated propulsion. I think in the future we won't be talking about engines, we'll be talking about integrated propulsion systems. I would actually say that the real key to the future of the propulsion business is in what I would call the energy companies. Today they have fossil fuel energy companies. In the future they're going to have to become sustainable fuel companies, because for a long time our long-range aeroplanes are still going to be powered by some form of thermal engine, whether it's a gas turbine or some other device. And the real key here is how is that synthetic fuel produced? And it doesn't matter whether it's a synthetic version of Jet A1 that drops in to an existing design and is burnt in a gas turbine, or even if it's hydrogen that powers an aircraft with a fuel cell. Those synthetic fuels, and hydrogen is just a synthetic fuel, have to be produced in a sustainable way. And that's something which I think we have to, as an industry, push the energy companies to really confront. The technology to do it is there today. The technology for producing synthetic liquid fuels is already at TRL6. The only thing that's stopping people doing it is the economics.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, long range there's still going to be jet engines, but it's how do you optimize for certain ranges based upon your propulsion. So eVTOLs, more than likely will be all electric. Regionals might be a hybrid solution where you use similar to a Tesla, or not a Tesla, but a Prius, right? You have a gas engine that spins a turbine that provides electricity to pulsars and things like that, and that provides a more optimized flight characteristics, and it's more efficient. So I think long term, we're going to start optimizing around different types of power plants for different mission profiles.
Absolutely.
Okay, another cynical question from the audience. What's your end game for the engine companies? Can you actually move the needle? You won't move the needle. I told you it was cynical. I keep deleting it, I'm so sorry. I'm not on fire today. What's the end game? You won't move the needle on financial impact. So you're just tying up companies so you can have the ability to match acquisition officers. And let's go back to energy. That's something else we can talk about.
Battery is a challenge for aviation, for notebooks as well, apparently.
So the end game for us on the venture side, we have, we're a strategic investor, we're a CVC, but we do have financial metrics as well. We've got to be good stewards of the shareholders and stakeholders' funds. So we are investing for financial returns, but we also recognize that we are here to push Boeing and that push the industry. And so, having those two things is a key metric for us.
So I mean, I would completely disagree with this statement. We're not a venture arm, we're an innovation center, and I honestly believe we will move the needle. That will be my measure of personal success when I either leave A-Cubed or retire, will be the legacy or the impact that the work we have done has left on the future of Airbus and its products. And I seriously believe that we will succeed in making things happen that would not have happened without the existence of an organization like ours.
You're talking a lot about retiring. Have you had a bad week?
No, but we all come to our sell-by date one day.
As I said at the beginning, the X of Embraer X, and I'm not sure if that was the case for HorizonX as well, but stands for exponential growth. So our end game is definitely to move the needle. Everything you're looking at, it's because we believe that by itself or being an enabler to something else will move the needle.
Any more questions from the audience?
Well, I'll just follow up on the second part of that question as well. So when we go in to do a deal, we recognize that CVCs, part of their legacy has been bad, because when they go into deals, they go with exclusivities and ROFRs and all these crazy provisions that limit the upside. So we go in, we try to be good stewards, market provisions, we don't have exclusivities, we don't have lockups, we don't have ROFRs, things along those lines. So, we recognize that we're here to help that company be successful. So we're not going to get into it to lock up for an M&A opportunity. My gut tells me most of the companies in our portfolio probably won't be an M&A, but will help enable their growth profile.
Does anyone want to give away their budgets? That's a no, no, no. Okay. Any more questions from the audience? Finally, I guess, I think, Michael, you talked about automotive, looking at that. Do you guys worry that there's a Tesla for aviation out there, or have we already seen it?
So last I saw, and Sarah maybe knows better than I, there's over 150 eVTOL startups out there.
I think it's 250 now.
Probably.
Sorry, 251.
252, 253. Just a rule of thumb, to get one of those certified and up in air, you might as well talk about $1 billion. So is there $250 billion floating around out there to get all these up and running? So my hypothesis is this is going to start necking down pretty quick. And the big primes will bet on a few players, see who wins that horse race, and ultimately it'll end up with a handful of I'll say, leaders in the pack.
But do you think there's room for at least one or two to get through and be like a Tesla?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is one of the point of fundamental technology change is one of the sort of change events in the industry which gives startups and new entrants a much better chance of competing with the incumbents, because the advantage that the incumbents like Airbus and Boeing have when we design a completely new electric aeroplane is significantly eroded when the technology is fundamentally different.
No, I almost hope that there is another one out there. As I said, I mean, to really thinking about disruptive innovation, I think it's great to collaborate. So hopefully we'll be betting on the right horses on that. But I think there will be a lot of consolidation, I believe. It's a big barrier for entrance, not only the money-wise, but it's pretty hard to certify an airplane. To your point, you're seeing big corporations trying to certify airplanes and traditional airplanes, without quoting names, but that are trying to certify regional airplanes and that have been suffering for years. And that is a traditional, no new technology or anything. So in terms of more than a know-how, the integration of the know-how, it's something that it's not that easy to achieve. But hopefully there will be one or two that will challenge us, and I will be a new kid in the game.
Okay, final question. One word. How would you sum up the next 5 years?
Continued disruption.
That's two, but I'll let you have continuous disruption.
Interesting.
Change.
Okay, and on those continuous disruption, interesting change. Thank you very much.